In this video, we will look at how to convert an equation into y equals mx plus b. So if you look at all the examples on this page, they are all called standard form. Everything is on one side, or just the constant is on one side of the equal sign. But regardless of what it looks like, y is not isolated for. When we have y equals mx plus b, y is on its own, and it's a really important form because it gives us the slope and the y-intercept. So our goal is to rearrange all of these equations into y equals mx plus b. And really, all we're doing is isolating for y, which means you're going to bring everything besides the y term to the other side. And if there's a coefficient in front of y, we will divide it out. So let's get started. One technique that might be helpful is if we're trying to isolate for y, circle the y term. So I want y on its own, so I'm going to circle it, and then everything else that's on the same side as it, it's going to get kicked to the other side. And when we move something to the other side, the sign changes. So I'm left with that positive y. The 3x becomes negative when it moves over, and the negative 7 becomes positive. And at this point, this is y equals mx plus b. The slope is negative 3, the y-intercept is 7. Okay, let's try another one. In number 2, I don't just have a single y, I have 6 y's. So this is just gonna add an extra step for us. But the first step is the same. Move the constant, move the 3x to the other side because they don't have a y attached to them. So now I have 6y. The 3x becomes negative when it moves over, and the 12 also becomes negative. And at this point, this is not y equals mx plus b because there is a 6 in front of the y. So to get rid of the 6, I'm just going to divide every single term by 6. And the reason I'm going to do that is because if I divide 6 by 6, the coefficient becomes 1 and it cancels out. So that's great, but I have to make sure I do it to everything. So now I have y equals. Now for the x term, I have the negative 3 over 6, which can get reduced to negative a half. So negative a half x. And then negative 12 divided by 6 reduces to a nice whole number of negative 2. And there we are, a slope of negative a half, the y-intercept is negative 2, and that's our equation. And now if I wanted to create a table of values or give you information about the slope, the steepness, the direction, I can. All right. The next one, we have 2x minus y equals 5. So here's negative y. I'll bring the 2x over. Please note that I didn't isolate for y here. I isolated for negative y because the sign belongs to the y. The 2x turns negative, and the 5, I haven't moved it. It's still on that same side, so it just stays positive 5. And now, technically, in front of the y, we have a negative 1. So I'm going to divide everything by negative 1. So positive y, and now negative 2 divided by negative 1 is positive 2. 5 divided by negative 1 is negative 5. All right, how about you pause the video here and try number 4 on your own, and then come back to check your work. Okay, so we're isolating the y. So we'll bring the negative 3 and the 4x to the other side. The 4x becomes negative, and the negative 3 becomes positive. And here, because there is no other coefficient in front of y, it's just like a positive 1, we're done. Okay, let's try number 5. There is a coefficient in front of y, so be careful with it. I want you to pause the video, try number 5 on your own, and then come back to check your work. All right, so I'm circling negative 4y, and the only thing I'm bringing over is the 2x. I'm left with negative 4y, not just 4y. The 2x turns negative, the 8 has not moved, so it's still positive. And now I'm going to divide everything, not by 4, by negative 4. So we do have to be careful with our signs here. Negative 2 divided by negative 4, well, first of all, the double negative becomes positive, and then 2 over 4 is just 1/2 x. And then 8 divided by negative 4 is negative 2. So we are going to have a negative y-intercept. All right, number 6, if you've made any mistakes in the past too, reflect on them and put them into practice here. Pause the video, try this out, isolate for y, then come back to check your work. Okay, so we're isolating for 2y, which means the negative 10 and the 6x moves over. The 6x becomes negative and the negative 10 becomes positive. Divide everything by 2 to get rid of that coefficient. Then negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3x, and then 10 divided by 2 is positive 5. Now, last one. Now, there are 2 different ways you can do this last one. You might notice that our y term, it's almost a simple solution where I can just bring 2 things over and I'm done, but the coefficient is negative 1. If that had been positive 1, it would be so much easier. So typically we've been leaving the y on the left side and bringing everything else over. But when it's something like this and the only problem I have is that the y is negative instead of positive, I'm allowed to bring the y to the other side and just have 5x minus 3 equals positive y, and then I'm done. But you know, some people really prefer having the y on the left side. They don't want to mix things up, and that's fine. We can do it the other way as well. So we could bring the 5x over, it becomes negative, bring the negative 3 over, it becomes positive. But then the only issue here is that you have to remember that there is a negative 1 in front of y. So divide everything by that negative 1. And then negative 5 divided by negative 1 is positive 5. 3 divided by negative 1, negative 3. And that's it. So 2 different ways you could have approached this one. You know, the y doesn't have to stick to the left side. Your choice, whatever you're comfortable with. But that's it. So again, circle that y term, bring everything else to the other side. And then if there's a coefficient for y that's not just a positive 1, divide it out to fully isolate for y and turn it into y equals mx plus b, because that form is a lot more useful. It gives us the slope and the y-intercept.